Hello, hello. How's it going, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Spencer Talks NASCAR. Spencer Urquhart here, ready to discuss all things Martinsville this week, y'all. We're going short track racing again here at Martinsville. Been a lot of short tracks recently. I believe 3 of the past 4 races have been at short tracks. Race number 8 on the year this week at Martinsville. Martinsville's a track that, it's kind of annoying at times. It's such an old track, but it's a historic venue that, as a longtime NASCAR fan, I really enjoy it. And speaking of longtime NASCAR fans, we've got our first guest of the season, Dawson Eiserloh, coming on. He's been following NASCAR for a long time. Got his own podcast now that launched this year, just like us, called the 4 Tire Change. Make sure to check that one out. He'll be on here in just a minute to talk all things Martinsville and discuss a little bit about Richmond as well, because Richmond was pretty boring race up until the end, which ended very controversially, if that's a word. In my opinion, it was kind of a controversial ending. But we'll talk about that. Should Martin Truex Jr. have been upset? Should Denny Hamlin have been penalized? And then we'll discuss Martinsville, about how the tire wear look like this week over there, about if Ford could bounce back, Hendrick or Gibbs, who has the upper hand, and then about my guy Kyle Busch, y'all. Is it time to panic? Because, man, Kyle Busch has not gotten off to a good start this year. And Richmond, normally his best track, 6 career wins there, he did not show up last week, so that was a bit disappointing. But anyway, y'all, another episode this week. Excited to get into it. Going to make it a little different this week now that we've got our first guest. Really excited to jump right into it, y'all, with Dawson Eiserloh of ESPN 1037 back in my hometown of Lafayette, Louisiana. How's it going, Dawson?
What is up, Spencer? Excited to do this, man. It's that point in the season where we're starting to know some things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly, man. Getting into the race number 8 on the year at Martinsville. So, we've got a lot of different tracks to look at, a lot of data there. So I guess just before we get into the topics here, just give me your thoughts on the season so far. 7 races in, 5 different winners. Byron and Hamlin have 2 wins each on the year. But just what are your overall thoughts? Have you been pleased so far with year 3 of the next gen car?
Yeah, it's been interesting too. I think you go back to the beginning and William Byron starts off the season winning the 500, and we know Daytona can go anywhere really. So for Hendrick to get one early on, it was kind of a bonus for them, right? They don't need a race like that. But after that, I guess the only thing I've been a little disappointed in is it feels kind of like we're going back in a little bit to where the power teams are really dominating, because since then it's been a lot of Hendrick and a lot of Gibbs, and we've seen Byron now up there a couple of times. Denny Hamlin now wins his second race, and if it wouldn't have been him, it'd have been Truex anyway. So another Gibbs car. Ty Gibbs hasn't won a race, but he's been at the front basically every race this year. So a lot of the same guys, and Kyle Larson as well. So I don't know if that's where I wanted to go. I was enjoying some of the parity that we had, but I think we kind of saw this coming, right? We figured once these teams had a chance to get their hands on the equipment for a couple of years, they were going to figure out ways. And look, they have the budgets and they have the resources and they have the best people in the industry. So they're starting to figure it out. Race-wise, look, we've had a mixed bag, I guess. Atlanta was one of the best races we've seen in a long time. And then we had some that were okay, like we talked about with Richmond, and we will talk about a little more. But all in all, I think it's been a fun start to the year. I'm just interested to see, who can jump up and kind of surprise some people right now that's not a part of Hendrick or Gibbs. But if not, we're going to at least have a battle between those 2 teams down the stretch.
For sure, man. Yeah, I'm hoping that someone will be Kyle Busch. We'll get to him in a little bit because, man, he is. So far, it's not been the case for him. So far, I've been a bit jealous of Gibbs' success, being that he's a former Gibbs driver. But anyway, let's get right into Gibbs, because they were the main topic of conversation at Richmond. We'll start off with Martin Truex Jr. because, man, he had that race won. So I understood why he was upset, but there are some people, especially Kyle Petty, during the week that were blasting him, calling him Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, saying he was crying and he shouldn't have been that upset. That's just racing. But, man, I mean, that whole thing was kind of messed up on his part to me, because Denny Hamlin, we'll get to him next, but to me, he rolled the restart, jumped it, and then he got kind of bumped by Hamlin and Kyle Larson. The rough race, I mean, that's just kind of racing. But then they get messed up with the penalty. I understand why he was frustrated. I think it's one of those things. He's normally a pretty chill guy, and then when he shows emotion, people are saying he's complaining. But I'll let you take the floor here, Dawson. Did you think MTJ overreacted, or was he justified to be that upset after the race?
You know, the funny thing is, I think Truex, it was really not the way he acts. I think I think it was the combination of a really frustrating day that kind of got the best of him in the end, and so that was surprising because when you think about the guys on track who are gonna, retaliate for something, you don't think of him right away, and then he ran after Hamlin as well after, which I think is where he was actually frustrated. Kyle Larson kind of caught a bit of the damage there that he wasn't really a whole part of. And he had a funny little interview on pit road afterwards saying, like, I don't think he's mad at me. I think he's just mad. And I was the guy who was closest to him. But yeah, it was surprising. He's got a lot of, again, the caution is what costed him and not necessarily Denny Hamlin. I get that he's upset that it's the way his teammate raced him, but it's for the win. I don't fault Denny at all for what he did. So, I think a lot of frustration. I think if you asked him today, I think Martin's probably over it and probably knows that he overreacted. But, look, he's had a rough run of luck the last 2 or 3 years. You know what I mean? He's flirted with retirement in that stretch as well. So he's looking for something to go his way. And it just feels like every time he puts himself in a good position, something goes wrong.
Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah, he had the bad luck last year. He had the great regular season, and then the playoffs came around, and just nothing could go his way. So, yeah, definitely tough for him. I think it may have been good that he overreacted a bit because this could kind of reignite his fire. I know he's a kind of guy that sometimes seems like is he all in? Like, is he always flirting with retirement, like you said? But I think after this, I think he's all in now, at least for this year. He's going to try his damnedest to win that second championship because, man, the second half of his career has been incredible. His first part of his career, he was just like a mid-pack driver, but he's aged like fine wine. He's now one of the elite drivers in the sport.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point too. And I remember when Truex was in the one car. Again going back a ways. And what he did at Furniture Row, I think doesn't get talked about enough. Like, and that was kind of in my age of not being following the sport quite as closely. But I mean, just one of the great stories, I think, in the history of the sport, what Furniture Row racing did. And then obviously it wasn't a whole lot of, lengthy story afterwards. They ended up shutting down pretty shortly thereafter. So no doubt it's been a great career for him. And, he's going to be in the playoffs, he's going to be up towards the top and usually probably advance a couple rounds. I think maybe he's due for a couple of good breaks when it comes to the playoffs this season.
Yeah, it could be a name to watch there because I feel like people want to pick Larson, Byron, Christopher Bell, Denny Hamlin. Those are going to be the probably 4 most popular picks. But yeah, MTJ could be getting slept on because I feel like a lot of fans just like just Martin Truex. He's mid, blah, but he's definitely still got it. So, but let's move on now to another veteran here, Denny Hamlin, and this is one that I can see why NASCAR had trouble with this because there's been times in the past, I mean, people brought up an example of Matt Kenseth rolling a restart at Richmond that didn't get called on. Back then, I don't know if the restart zone rules are quite as strict, where nowadays they've got that pretty cut and dry rule where if you jump before that line, which it looked like he did, then should have been penalized, but it was late in the race. NASCAR deemed it a good restart, as the president dude said. So I'm just like, I don't know though, because it was one of those things to where when you watch the replay, I mean, it looked like he clearly rolled it. I get that in real time. It's kind of tough to make that call, but what do you think, Dawson? Should they have penalized Denny, or do you think it was a clean ending?
It's really difficult. I think it's one of those calls that NASCAR is not like other sports in a lot of different ways, and officiating is one of the main ones. I brought up the point. So look, did he roll the restart? Absolutely. Like, he definitely jumped in. I mean, if you're going by the letter of the law, he should have been penalized. The race, he would have been put to the back of the lead lap pack or whatever it was. But again, this was also tough because this was the last restart. You never had it. You didn't have a chance to penalize him. And look, if this penalty happened on lap 200, I think they do penalize him. I think they send him to the back of the lead lap or wherever they do, pass through penalty, something. But they didn't have that luxury and it was for them going to be either decide the race on a penalty or don't. And so, look, it's tough. And I think the difficult thing about it is now you're going to have guys really start to push that threshold because they have a precedent of not getting penalized now. And look, the next guy who gets penalized on a restart, especially if it's late in the race, is going to have a real problem with NASCAR, and they're going to be warranted in doing that. But at the same time, they don't want to be the ones that are calling, like, and I made the comparison. You don't want to be the NBA official that has to call a foul on a drive to the basket with 3 seconds left with the game on the line, right? NASCAR's not supposed to be like that. It's not supposed to be, it's, the old adage is that the drivers police themselves. And so they decided in the moment that they didn't want to decide the race on that penalty. And I can't fully fault them for that, but I will say it's a slippery slope. And, these next few races, especially look, a place like Martinsville, you could see a similar situation, right? Because getting that advantage into turn one is likely the difference in winning the race or not, unless you're going to bump and run somebody in 3 and 4. So they're going to have tough decisions to make in the future, but I don't fully fault them for what they did.
Heard that, man. Yeah, that's a fair assessment because it's tough to make that call in the moment. But there will be eventually a time where they do it, and then that driver is going to be pissed off. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it doesn't affect Kyle Busch or someone that's a more popular driver because Denny Hamlin, I feel like it kind of, if someone brought up a good point, if it had been Chase Elliott, people wouldn't be as outraged. It's Denny Hamlin. He's the black sheep, so people love to criticize anytime he wins a race. So in his defense, it's like, it was a judgment call. Let's move on. So, all right, let's turn the page to Martinsville. And I know you talked about this on your show before, Dawson, tire wear. And tire wear has been a big theme of this year, especially at Bristol, because Bristol, the tire wear was just so crazy, and that drivers were just having tire fall off to the point where they were blowing tires left and right, especially early on before they got used to it. But then we turned to Richmond, and the tire wear seemed not really to be much of a factor. It was just a pretty straightforward race, just hard to pass, just kind of meh. If it wasn't for that final restart, that Richmond race would have gone down as probably the most boring race of the year. So from what you've gathered so far, are you expecting Martinsville to have a good amount of tire wear, or do you think it's just going to be more like Richmond where there's not going to be as much?
Well, what's really interesting, and I don't pretend to understand all the aerodynamic stuff and all the rules packages things and the tapered splitters and everything else that they've done to these cars to try and help these packages out. But the short track package wasn't used at Bristol, and that's interesting to me. It was used at Richmond. And so now Richmond had a couple other caveats in there that they had rain early, and then we had the wet weather tires that were used early on, and that actually produced the better racing. We had an exciting first 20-30. Track was damp and was drying out, so did all that play into it? Maybe the track didn't get as hot, so the tire wear wasn't as prevalent. Like, that's all possible. I don't think it's going to be scorching hot at Martinsville, though. So, I don't know. I think racing-wise, look, I don't think it's going to all of a sudden be prime Martinsville where everybody's moving around and you've got a lot of great passing and action everywhere. I think it's still going to be difficult. I think it's still going to be a track position race. I've talked about it in the past, like the road courses, they decided to go back to stage breaks just because they didn't want these races to get too strung out. I wonder if Martinsville is going to be similar to that. Like, it's just going to be about who grabs that track position and then, trying to time out your pit stops for the stage breaks. And then, of course, in the last run, you'll have a green flag stop in there if you don't have any cautions. But, usually we have a few. Martinsville, if there's a spin, you got to call a caution, right? Because there's no way to get out of the way. So with all that being said, I hope it's more like Bristol because I enjoyed the racing more, but I do worry. The one thing too is look, it's different. It's tighter than Richmond. So you're going to still have guys who are going to be able to move people out of the way if they want to forcefully, especially late in the race. You'll see that when the stakes are higher. But as far as having a great competitive race with good tire wear where there's balance throughout the field, I don't have a lot of expectations for it. Although I do think it'll be a little bit more than Richmond is as long as we get clear skies, which, look, if you're in a drought, just have a NASCAR race, you'll find some rain. So maybe that won't be the case.
For sure. Yeah, hopefully it'll be a pretty good race. I'm thinking it could be, but yeah, it's always a concern of this next gen car on the short track. Sometimes it feels like it's impossible to pass. And if that's the case, it could be a long day, but hopefully there'll be some action up front. But qualifying will definitely be important. You definitely want to be in that top 15, I'd say. So, all right, let's move on to the next one. Will the Ford drivers shine this week? I remember last year this race, Ryan Preece won the pole, which came as a shock because he hadn't done much, and then he ended up leading a lot of laps, but didn't really get the finish he wanted. So, I guess it's more actually, I say Ford, but really more Stewart Haas because I feel like Penske, they're still there. Logano bounced back last week. Blaney's a contender, and then RFK Racing's carried over their success from last year, but even they haven't been on the level of Hendrick and Gibbs. So I guess we'll first start off with Stewart Haas. Do you think that this is the week that they make a statement?
I've been impressed with Stewart Haas this year. I did a lot of preseason talk, and I asked, I had Bob Pockers on. I asked him, like, is this a do or die year for them in some ways? Like not closing up shop, but like as far as being considered one of the teams that we, know to deal with. I also asked the question, is Front Row Motorsports likely to pass them up just as far as the way we think of the hierarchy? And so far, they've pushed back on that significantly, right? They've run well. Josh Berry led a lot of laps at Richmond last year. These are the types of tracks, as we get specific to Martinsville, that they've had success in. They've won New Hampshire a bunch of times. Eric Almirola has had some random wins at those types of tracks. So they should have a good shot this week. But I've overall been impressed. And even Noah Gragson, look, they got that 35-point penalty. If they won for that, he'd be in the mix in the low 20s in the point standings, kind of on the, in striking distance of a playoff spot on points. So, they've been better than I thought. I've had higher expectations for Ryan Preece. I thought it was great for him to get this shot, and it hasn't worked out for him, unfortunately, so far. But this is a week. If there's going to be a week for them to win a race, they've got a good chance to do it. It's tough knowing how fast Gibbs is going to be and Hendrick as well. And then you have Penske. Look, it's been such an unorthodox year for them. When Blaney's been fast, Logano's been terrible. When Logano's been fast, Blaney's been slow. And then Cindric's kind of been a mixed bag. So I don't know what to expect from them. And Harrison Burton in the Wood Brothers car has still just been really struggling. So, yeah, this is a great opportunity for them, but I don't see them winning the race. I see them running well, though.
For sure, man. Yeah, that's a fair assessment. Yeah, they'll definitely be, I think, among the top 10, they'll have probably 2 or 3 guys. But, yeah, I think it's going to be a Hendrick-Gibbs race, and that'll be one of our last topics here. I know got to let you go here soon. But, yeah, Hendrick or Gibbs, who has the upper hand? Because it's tough to say at Martinsville to me because Gibbs, yeah, they've been the best team at short tracks this year. But Hendrick, Martinsville is Hendrick's track. The days of Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson, and even the day William Byron, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, even Alex Bowman has a win here.
Yeah, and, I guess specific to this week, I would probably lean more to Gibbs. I just think they've shown a little bit more speed on these tracks this year, which, again, we don't have a great sample size to assess it because Martinsville's kind of its own thing. But, I think with what Bell and Hamlin and Truex have done in recent weeks, and you throw in Ty Gibbs, who's just been really consistent, which isn't what you expect out of a second-year driver, I like their chances. Long-term, though, if we're talking season-long, I still think Chase is going to figure some things out here. I think it's good for the sport if he does. Alex Bowman's the only driver, I think, of either one of these teams that's not in the top 10 in points, and he's only 11th. It's not like he's far behind. So they have truly dominant those two. I still think, when you get back into some of the intermediates, which we're going to have a stretch in the schedule coming up here pretty soon where we see a lot of those, Kyle Larson's my favorite going into almost every one of those races. So that's where I think they'll start to get back, handling more of these wins. But no, for now, look, they're going back and forth. They're trading them week after week. So I think they're both in great spots. But this week, I like Gibbs having the upper hand.
For sure, man. Yeah, I think they'll both be up front. But, yeah, the Gibbs cars have just been so freaking good on the short tracks. It's just you can't deny the data. I definitely want to deny the data as a Kyle Busch fan, being that he's a former JGR driver. So let's talk about him real quick because I feel like he's been arguably the biggest disappointment of the season outside of Joey Logano. But at least Joey Logano got a top 3 last week. Kyle Busch, though, nowhere to be found. RCR not showing much speed outside of the drafting track. So, man, I hate to panic. It's only 7 races in, about to be race 8. But, man, is it time to get worried as a Kyle Busch fan?
Yeah. When it comes to Kyle Busch, what I would say is I'm not concerned all that much because he's still putting together some points runs here. He's still putting together some finishes at times. But I will say NASCAR's weird, right? When you look at a sport like the NFL, which I know you follow just as much as I do, with a running back, right? You know that age, you know that drop off, you know when a guy is likely to start to take a turn down. In NASCAR, that line's a little more blurry, and it's not to say guys in their 40s can't win. We've seen it happen before, but look, there was some fall off, right? And Kevin Harvick kind of experienced it. All of a sudden, he wasn't winning races anymore. Now, he still was just a master of finding points and finding finishes and still make fall off that happens. And it's a pretty steep drop off when you look at some of the data. So I'm not saying that's happening right now for Kyle, but if and when it does happen, these are the types of results that I think are going to be the indicators of it. So in that regard, I understand the concern, but I do still think, look, what he did last year with RCR was impressive. They've had another weird year where Austin Dillon's just absolutely lost out there. But Kyle's finding some finishes. I think he's got to have some faster cars too. I think it's some on that team as well. They just haven't brought it as much as I thought they would.
For sure. Yeah, hopefully RCR can figure it out because I definitely don't think Kyle's washed up. I mean, he won 3 races last year. He seems more motivated than ever. They just got to get the team together. It's a team sport at the end of the day. I know the driver gets all the credit, but let's be real. I mean, Kyle Busch's pit crew has been awful this year. So hopefully they can figure that out. They made a lot of changes. Austin Dillon, new crew chief. So we'll see if RCR can right the ship. And so I doubt you're going to pick an RCR driver to win, but let's move on to that before we sign off here. Dawson's Martinsville pick to win. Who you got, my friend?
Yeah, and it's funny because I made this pick on my own pod, so I got to stick to it. But being that it's my only appearance so far this year, it's gonna come as a surprise because I went with my biggest long shot of the year. I picked Erik Jones. I've been impressed with Legacy. John Hunter Nemechek's had infinitely more speed than I thought he would. And Erik Jones has been right there as well. They're both kind of lingering right outside the playoff bubble. And so, I felt like this is a great time for him to try and jump up and steal one. And so it's not a usual pick I would make, but this week I just was feeling something different. And so decided Erik Jones. I really almost picked John Hunter. But I think Erik at least had a little more experience. If he's up there up front, if those cars do bring speed to the track, I think Jones is a little bit more well-equipped to handle it. And so I'll go with him. But it would be a surprise. I know that very much so. But I'm going to go with Erik Jones.
For sure, man. That's a bold one because I'm going chalk this week, as we'll say in our best bets here. I'm just going to go with Denny Hamlin. I mean, he's been killing it on these short tracks. I know that's the boring pick, but he actually hadn't won at Martinsville since 2015. He used to be Mr. Martinsville right up there with Jimmy and Jeff, but he hadn't won here in a while. But I think he breaks that dry spell this week because he's the kind of guy. I know he's had his playoff struggles, but in the regular season, he's someone that's been as great as ever. And the age thing, him and Martin Truex Jr., they have defied the whole age thing, both over 40 years old and driving better than ever.
Yeah, no, for sure. You're right about that.
So anyway, yeah, we'll see if Erik Jones can come through, y'all. That's a big sleeper pick. I'll have some more sleepers here for y'all on the best bets. Not too many sleepers though this week. I kind of went chalk this week. So if y'all want a sleeper, there y'all go. Dawson's going with Erik Jones. So anyway, man, it's been fun. I know you've got to run, so we'll sign off here. But before you go, let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, Four Tire Change is on YouTube. We're rolling with weekly episodes. ESPN Southwest Louisiana. You can check out Four Tire Change, and then on Twitter, I'm at Eiserloh Dawson. So we're doing a lot here. Big spring season. Excited about it, and excited for the NASCAR season to roll on, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure, Dawson. Have a good one, man. Really appreciate Dawson dropping in here, and now we shall move on to our best bet segment before we conclude this episode of Spencer Talks NASCAR. All right, y'all. So here are our best bets for the week here at Martinsville. We'll go through the field real quick before we break down We'll break it down with the analysis. Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr. at the top of the odds chart. No surprise there, considering how good they've been at short tracks. Ryan Blaney up pretty high. He did win at Martinsville last year, as well as Kyle Larson. Blaney the highest non-Hendrick or Gibbs driver. Larson the highest Hendrick driver. Another JGR guy up in the mix there. Christopher Bell. Joey Logano, after his strong run last week, back among the favorites. And William Byron, Ty Gibbs, and Chase Elliott all deadlocked at 11-1. And Brad Keselowski, veteran there in the mix at 17-1. Then we get to our longer shots. Tyler Reddick, Josh Berry, Chase Briscoe, all at 22-1. Kyle Busch kind of buried on the odds chart this week after his slow start, 28-1, along with Alex Bowman. Then we got some more intriguing options there. Ross Chastain, Chris Buescher, and Bubba Wallace all at 30-1. Then we get to our long shots here. Stuart Haas guys, a couple of them somewhat in the mix. They're 55-1, not that long, but long enough to be considered a long shot. Ryan Preece and Noah Gragson, and Daniel Suarez at 80-1. Everyone else at 100-1 or longer. And man, I can't believe Dawson picked Eric Jones. Shout out to him, though. He had some stones picking Eric Jones. Then made a little rap there. But anyway, yeah, Eric Jones, 250-1 to win this thing. And if he wins it, man, we'll for sure have to have Dawson back next week to take his victory laps, because, man, that would be something else. Eric Jones, Legacy Motor Club, what a storyline that would be. Toyota, though, I mean, Toyota's been great on short track, so not completely crazy, but definitely a bold strategy there from our guy Dawson Eiserloh. And here's the rest of the field there, all super long shots. Not going to talk too much about them unless they would show me something. All right, let's get into it here. We got them scrolling across the screen. My picks, y'all. Top 10 to finish top 10. I like Bubba and Ross Chastain, y'all. Bubba Wallace has a pretty good history here at Martinsville. He's better here than his teammate Tyler Reddick. I wanted to pick Tyler Reddick. Normally don't get Tyler Reddick at those kind of odds, but man, Tyler Reddick has stunk it up this year, y'all. Not this year. He's been pretty good. I'm at Martinsville throughout his career. What I meant to say, he has stunk it up. For this year, he's been pretty good. So it could be a sleeper, but if I had to pick, I'm going to go with Bubba. I think he's the pick this week among the 23-11 drivers. He's got some good runs here before. He's won here in the Truck Series. And Ross Chastain has done pretty good here since moving to Trackhouse. Had 2 top 5s in 2022, one of which was the Hail Melon. Last year didn't run quite as well here, but still a solid bet, I think, to finish top 10 at plus odds. And our top 5 picks there, William Byron and Ty Gibbs. Really like William Byron this week to continue his success. He hadn't been quite as good on short tracks as he was last year, but he's still really good. I mean, he's a former Martinsville winner. So I think to finish top 5, he's getting a little bit slept on. And then Ty Gibbs been super consistent this year. A little bit off last week at Richmond. Had been so good all year, but I think he bounces back this week with a top 5 run. He's been Mr. Reliable this year and actually offers a little bit of value with his odds because of the fact that he hadn't won a cup race before, but he has delivered very quality results. So while I'm not going to quite pick him to win, I'm going to say he does well and gets the top 5. And then our top 3 pick, this is one that's a little on the bolder side, Chase Elliott. I think Chase bounces back this week, 5-1. Pretty good value for him to finish. That's supposed to be top 3, y'all, not top 5. I don't think I can edit that, so just bear with me. That should be top 3 for Chase Elliott, 5-1. Wish you could get him at 5-1 to finish top 5, but top 3 over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Some of these prices you can't get here at DraftKings, and for some reason they don't have top 10 odds up at the moment. They did yesterday, though, so we'll see if they get those back up here. But yeah, Chase Elliott, top 3 on FanDuel. I believe that is at 5-1. So going over to FanDuel if you want Chase Elliott 5-1. But here on DraftKings is the only book I've seen where you can get Denny Hamlin, my pick to win, at 5-1. Pick Denny this week. My first time picking him this year. Maybe I'll jinx him. I hadn't been picking him this year, and he's been winning. He's won twice. I've been higher on William Byron this year. I picked him to win the Daytona 500. Got that right. Almost had my 3rd outright winner of the year in 7 weeks. That would have been a pretty solid mark, but unfortunately MTJ didn't get it done. Still got 2 outrights though, so can't complain. I mean, it's hard to get outrights in NASCAR. I mean, look how long the odds are for the winners there, or the odds to win being pretty long for even the favorite Hamlin, 5-1. But I think he gets it done this week. Gibbs has been super strong on short tracks this year, so we shall see who breaks through. Maybe we'll have an upset like Dawson's thinking, but Martinsville tends to be pretty chalky, so I'm going to go ahead and rock chalk this week with Denny Hamlin. So that's going to do it for this one, y'all. Appreciate everyone that tuned in. Thanks to Dawson for coming on and sharing his insight here on Spencer Talks NASCAR. Going to try to have more guests on throughout the year. You know, Dawson knows his stuff. Not sure who his favorite driver is. We're going to have to ask him about that if we have him on again, and going to have some more fanalists. That's what I tend to call myself as. I'm not like on the front lines. I can't really call myself a reporter, but I definitely am passionate about the sport and try to give you guys as much info as I can with some passion injected in as a fan of the sport. I'll admit I'm not a completely unbiased reporter. You know, I'm a fan, you know, so I might have a little bit of bias. So we're going to try to have on some other guests, you know, some other reporters. I know Dawson had Bob Pockrass on, one of the OG NASCAR beat writers. So we're going to have to see if we can get someone like that on. And then if we keep this going, maybe some drivers, crew chiefs, people involved with the sport, you know, to give us that inside perspective. So we'll keep this going, y'all. Thanks again to Dawson and all the listeners out there. This has been Spencer Urquhart with Spencer Talks NASCAR. Appreciate y'all. Enjoy the race at Martinsville. Peace.